Good evening. This evening, I'm going to talk about a very special man, mention a couple of books you might be able to get a hold of. But before I get to that, let me just again encourage you to be praying for our church, for our churches, plural, around the country. Pray for God's provision for them and for God's blessing on them. We don't want people to slip away from God, and we naturally do slip away from God. And pray that God would draw people to Him, that He'd use these times to make us better Christians, not worse, and that God would give each pastor wisdom about what to do to help his congregation. Pray for our president. Pray for our folks that are working with the hospitals and medical. They've got all kinds of pressure on them, and let's just thank God for how good He is. What a great God! I got the nicest text this morning. I'd read it for you, except I'm filming this with my phone. But one of our young men who, I don't know, 25 or 30 years ago was a member of our church, and on occasion our paths will cross, but he sent me a text this morning. He's been watching the morning posts, the morning moments I do, and church services or whatever things and he just thanked me for, and he's got a family. He's very successful in his work and a very, very good life, and he said, I just want to thank you for the investment in me as a young person. I use the things you taught me every day in my job, and just some gracious words. I'm so encouraged when God looks after people, blesses their homes, their families, their futures, and I just want to encourage all of you. Love people, be good to people, and the world's got some jerks in it. You'll see tonight when I share these stories tonight, but we don't quit on God because people are bad. We're here to honor God and live for God and make a difference in helping people. They crucified our Savior. That's who we're following. So understand we're going to have a few difficulties, but what a great God we serve. And what a great weekend. That first Easter morning, there was only a couple of people around. It wasn't a giant congregation, but it sure made an impact that changed the world. Jesus went through the grave and through death and out the other side and just basically said, hey, everything's fine over here. I'll come back and get you in a bit. Very encouraged. We've got a bright future ahead of us. Let's walk with God and let's get some more people saved while we can. And I want to mention in Acts chapter 1, I mentioned before, ye shall be witnesses unto me, he said, in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the uttermost parts of the earth. He was going geographically out further and further. Matthew 28, the Great Commission, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. The Great Commission is great because of who gave it, the greatest one that ever could. Great because of the great expanse that it's to go to the whole world. It's great because it's a gospel that'll save people from hell. Someone's on their way to hell, and in a matter of moments putting their faith in Christ, they're on their way to heaven. That's incredible. It's a great commission. It has been the church's marching order for these 2,000 plus years that we are to go into all the world and preach the gospel. And yet the battles are there. We mentioned a couple of nights ago, I talked a little bit about William Carey and the battle he faced, and the ridiculous statement, when God sees fit to reach the heathen, he'll do it without you. And I thought, no, that's exactly how he's going to reach the heathen. And these were good men who said things like that. But we get off, and sometimes we get thinking we know more than we do, and we don't know enough Bible. We know a lot of culture. This evening, I want to mention, this is this is a great book. This is actually has writing in it from 1890, and I don't know where to hold that for you to see it, but it's the story of John Patton in New Hebrides Islands, now Vanuatu. This book would be a little more difficult for you to get, but it's the exact same book is this one, and you can find this one a little bit more easily, the story of John G. Patton. And there's an autobiography, but then there's one written by his brother. This is by James Patton. One of them you can get for free, depending on where you look, or close to free online, is the autobiography. John Patton, just real quick, a few things about him. Grew up in a great Christian home, godly home, a praying home. When his parents, when John was born, his parents gave him to God and prayed for him that God would use him as a missionary. From Scotland, and he grew up in a good church, very strict home, hardworking home. As a young man, he went off to work in the city, and he taught for a while, and after a while, he got saved a little bit later in his teen years, but he got this thing settled about his salvation, got reading his Bible, fell in love with God. At one point he had a great job, and he was working with maps and map making, a really good job. And the boss said, "I've got a great opportunity for you, but if I'm going to move you into this position, you need to make a promise you'll stay with me for 7 years." And here, this young man, still in his teens, as I understand it, he said, "I'm sorry, I can't make that promise. I've got another master." And in those days, there was a lot of apprenticeships and commitment relationships. And he said, "What do you mean you got another master?" He said, "I've given my life to Jesus Christ, and I can't tell you I'm going to do this for 7 years. I don't know what he wants me to do for 7 years." And the man yelled at him, hollered at him, said, "If you don't take this job, you're going to lose this job. We'll fire you." And he left there because he didn't want to cause trouble. His dad worked somehow affiliated with it, and he went and just got a laborer's job out in the fields. And but as a young man, he gave his heart to Christ. And as I said this morning in the morning moments, faith that moves mountains should start by faith that moves us, faith that changes our lives. And so John Patton, the story of this man, just very briefly, and I'm doing these, and our staff guys, I asked what they thought I should do, but I think these great, you find these old books, and sometimes you'll find them in bookstores. They're worth having just because they look so cool on the bookshelf. And the modern day decorators, they're putting them this way. You have no idea what the book is. This is why they have a name in the binding, so you know what books you've got. But anyway, whatever. Some people don't read their books. They decorate with them. But John Patton, he got working with the ministry in the city and in Glasgow. And he had some rough times, and he'd been threatened, and he'd had people violently attack him, and he was working in a rougher area. But he was learning to deal with rough things. With the short time he taught, he had some students, big enough students, that they challenged him physically and got in a fight with him, and he was learning to deal with difficulties and injustice. And here he is in the city trying to just help people, and he's got people throwing rocks at him, and he's had some difficult times. But the neat things, so he goes through hardships and trials, godly Christian man, gets married, and he ends up in New Hebrides, and one of his religious leaders in his life said, "You're thinking of going to those islands?" He said, "Yes." And he said, "My heart breaks for the people who've not heard the gospel." And he said, "You'll go there and they'll eat you, and you'll have a wasted life. Don't go there." And he was discouraged from going into missions. But he and his wife go there. She has a baby, and again, the Vanuatu Islands, New Hebrides at that time, it's a string of islands, multiple islands, some bigger than others, and we support missionaries there now. There's some great churches there, still some very, very primitive, some of the most primitive people in the world there, and over a little bit further to the east from there in New Guinea area. But he landed on this island and worked and little by little trying to get his connection, and he got a good relationship with some people, and some people got saved. But there was constant warring going on the island, and violence, and it was a very difficult time. And his wife got sick, and she died, and then their baby died, and there was war going on where one of the men that had gotten saved and liked him, they were going to kill him, and the guy took him and showed him, "You get up way up in this tree and hide there, don't move." So he's way up in this tree in the middle of the night, hiding among the limbs, and he just stayed there for the longest time. And the guy finally came and got him down. It was a violent life, and a difficult life, and a hurting life, and constant struggles reaching the most primitive of the most primitive people, and a lot of battles and a lot of hurt. And he was sick. Just it had not been for this one faithful Christian man that had come to love him, and they cared for each other. Had it not been for him, he was so sick he'd have died. This man literally nursed him through the jungle fevers that you get, and helped him. And where I'm going with the story, just quickly, we'll skip off that. You can read it. A lot of adventure and a lot of warring and a lot of fighting. At one point, he's doing some work, and one of the violent people came and spears, and they were gonna put a spear through him. Or another time had a gun. They had a pistol of some kind they'd gotten from one of these trading ships or something, and he just kept working. He said, "God's gonna take care of me," and the guy finally left, and He wasn't gonna, he did pray, he said, but a lot of stories, a lot of delicate, one time there's two warring factions and they came and got him and they were going in, just gonna kill each other, slaughter each other with spears and rocks and clubs, and he got right down in the middle of them and parted them and got him to agree to peace for a little while. But he was suffering so badly. He goes back to England because he lost his wife, lost his baby. They were after him. Every day he feared for his life. And a ship came along and he got out to that ship and went back to Scotland. While he was there, the mission board, now this is a significant thing. The mission board is the group of people who help raise money to finance these missionaries. And he comes back, his world is crushed, his body is sick beyond words, he's weak, he's frail, his wife's gone, his baby's gone. He's given his life for these few years there in this island, trying desperately. And the guy in charge of the mission board said, "You're a quitter. Had you stayed there and died, we could have told people you were martyred and it would have raised more money for missions. But now you come back, now you're a quitter and you're going to cost us money. People are going to give less money because it didn't work." And he scolded him for going, losing his wife, losing his baby, nearly losing his life. And John Patton, what he did then, he decided, well, I'm going to make up for coming home. He didn't get mad at the guy. He didn't call his union. He didn't write nasty things on Facebook or social media. He went around raising money for missions. And he went church to church to church raising money. Well, in the process of that, he meets this gal and remarries. And I'm thinking, that's a girl of faith. He loses his first wife. She's married him, go back with him. And they go back to the next island. And the next island, the Lord opens the doors of faith. And it was like everybody in the island got saved. And such wonderful stories took place. And literally churches and converts by the hundreds, and a whole island turned to God. And they brought their statues and their idols and burned them. And he said it's like each day more and more people bringing their idols, and it was just a miracle that what God did there. But understand this, it wouldn't happen had he gotten bitter and had he quit. And the greatness of John Patton's ministry and the greatness of what God used him to do was baptized in suffering and hardship. And the rigor, a difficult trip from Scotland down to the South Pacific. And understand, they're over here in Scotland in the Atlantic. They had to go all the way down toward almost the South Pole. And I don't know if they went under Africa or under South America. I'm assuming they went under South America, but they had to get over to the Pacific, near to Australia. Very difficult journey on the ship. And this is 1824 when he was born, and so 1840 or so when he, just as my memory sticks, he was in his late teens, or he was a little older. I think he was in his late 20s when he went to New Hebrides, but it was hard. And then he buried his wife and buried his baby, and fled for his life. Every single day he was fearful of being killed. And he was around here. He'd come to love these people, and they hated him. And not only was he hated on his island, when he comes back to Scotland, now he's ridiculed and accused and slandered. Had he quit at any one point, the greatness of his ministry would have never happened. But because he endured hardness, that's what Paul told Timothy, endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Because he took the difficult and he kept pressing on for God and kept pressing on for God. Because he took the hardships and he took and was it just? No, it was unjust. But guess what? The world is an unjust place. And because he took the injustice and kept pressing on, God opened the world to him, and an entire island is saved, and converts, and he spends his whole life. And his wife, his second wife now, she's teaching sewing, and the people are sewing clothes because they didn't have any clothes, and teaching language, and he was able to put the words of their language and help them understand writing. And the story is so amazing. John Patton, great story. And you can get children's stories. I'd read these to your kids. Your kids ought to know the stories of John Patton. But parents, we too need to read, to be reminded of living by faith, and that sometimes living by faith is painful. Sometimes living by faith is sacrificial. Sometimes living by faith, it will break us. And we can decide if we're just going to press on. I hope we'll get a life like John Patton, I hope none of us have to live like John Patton, but I hope we have the faith of John Patton to press on with the work God's called us to do. And he didn't call us to an easy life. He said, take up your cross and follow me. He didn't say, take up your limousine. And we're to be busy for God. I hope you have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes sharing these, and I look forward to getting together again.